So,
Yeah.
hello everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am Shubhrata Sarkar. I am the coordinator of NANO Global Project. We have Dr. Sophie Siaba, the CEO of POGO, and Dr. Lillian Krug, the scientific coordinator of POGO. So, those who are not aware about NANO is the NF POGO alumni network for the ocean. So the scholars who receive training from different training programs of POGO are the member of NANO. And our mentor as well as our trainers are also the member of NANO. So the objective of the NANO is to maximize the benefits and extending opportunities beyond the NF POGO training. So within NANO, we have different types of programs. For example, we do networking, we have joint research project, we have outreach and capacity building activities. And this NANO is one of these joint research project of NANO. So this NANO is the full form of this NANO is a global study of deoxygenation, ocean acidification, and productivity at selected sites. So with this project, we collect the in situ data of essential oceanographic variables from the coastal area from some selected locations. So these essential oceanographic variables include temperature, salinity, dissolved oxygen, chlorophyll, and pH. But some sampling sites also collect the data on nutrients, phytoplankton, and some other variables. So at this moment, we have 36 sampling sites from 18 countries of Africa, Latin America, and Asia. So the objective of this project is to promote in situ and promote satellite remote sensing observations of essential oceanographic variables from the coastal sites. And we also do the interstation comparison of this data because this project was started in 2017. So since then we have some good amount of data. So now we are doing interstation comparison. And we have sampling site representative for each of the sampling sites. So the sampling site representatives are responsible for monitoring their essential oceanographic variables from their sampling site. And the sampling site representatives are the member of NANO. In addition to collecting oceanographic variables data, we also organize capacity development activities. We also do outreach and citizen science-based activities. So this webinar is one of the capacity development activities of this project. So with this webinar, we invite speakers to share their recent research with us so that it enhances our capacity in ocean science. And this webinar is open to all, so anyone can join. We usually announce about this webinar on our social media so that everyone can know about it and then join with us. So today we have Alifa Haque from University of Dhaka, Bangladesh, and she will talk about from citizen science to open source low-cost technology, monitoring versus policing of small-scale fisheries. Alifa Haque is at the end of her doctoral studies at the Nature-Based Solution Initiative in the Department of Biology, University of Oxford, UK. She pursued a MSc in Biodiversity Conservation and Management from the same university. Alifa's thesis towards a socially just, sustainable fishery, preserving sharks and rays in the Bay of Bengal, aims to prepare a sustainability model which is replicable for similar context in the global south for threatened species of sharks and rays in close conjunction with the fishing communities. It places a locally driven bottom-up approach from academic literature to action, a narrative absent in the current management regimes. Haque created a platform for research-based conservation actions, collaborating with local fishers and traders to fill the dearth of knowledge on shark rays in Bangladesh and initiating actions for mitigating impacts. She works at the challenging intersection of endangered species conservation and fisheries as a means of livelihood generation for fishers of Bangladesh. Alifa's vision is to generate a context-appropriate, community-empowered, and collaborative fishery model with preservation and sustainability at its core. So before we go to talk, I just want to share two things. So this meeting is being recorded. We will upload the recorded version of this webinar on our Pogo YouTube channel. So if you do not want to be recorded, please switch off your camera. And this talk will have two sections. In first section, we will have a 30 minutes talk from our speaker, and then we will have a question and answer session for 30 minutes. So if you have any question, you can press the raise hand reaction button, or you can just write your question in the chat box. So over to Alifa Haque, and thank you very much for accepting our invitation.
Thank you very much, Subrata Bhai, and thank you very much, everyone, for coming and attending for this webinar. I'm super excited. I'll be sharing my presentation in a bit. For that, probably, Subrata Bhai, if you want to stop sharing your screen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Give me a minute. I hope you can see the screen.
Yes, it's perfect.
Okay, fantastic. So as Subrata Bhai have very kindly introduced me, I have just finished my PhD with the University of Oxford, and my thesis was looking at how fisheries can be sustainable and what sort of problems that they face, especially when you're working with species such as sharks and rays, which are in many cases non-commercial bycaught species, and in many cases in our global south countries do not take much importance into the national agenda because we have so many other things to work on, and that starts on commercially important species, ensuring enough livelihood generation for the local communities, health issues, education issues, and many other things. So my work wanted to really deep dive into these problems and interactions, that how conservation in global south could really work, making sure that the local communities who are in many cases the cost bearers of many conservation actions can put into the system in a way that it is collaborative, truly meaningful, in a truly meaningful way, and there is effective ways of managing such a resource. Today, I'm going to talk about 4 different projects that we are doing and piloting in Bangladesh, where citizen science and low-cost technology is extremely helpful and can be helpful. And I have also added this little bit in the talk title, is monitoring versus policing, because in many cases, while we kind of use such monitoring techniques, we have a very top-down approach of collecting data, monitoring a certain fishery, but we often forget that these monitoring activities cannot become only policing, only surveillance of these fisheries, but needs to be something which is extremely collaborative and that has mutually beneficial impacts on both the fishery, the fishers, and of course, the people who are interested in managing these fisheries. First, as I said, I work with sharks and rays, and I really wanted to give a little bit of background about those. This is one of the pictures in a good day in a landing site in winter, where you could very commonly see thousands of individuals of sharks and rays over many species which are caught and landed, bycaught and landed within the coastline of Bangladesh. Here in this particular photo, you would see more than 7 species, and many of them are critically endangered species. Now, globally, sharks and rays are in a very problematic scenario. In a very recent assessment of IUCN Red List, we have found that more than 37% of sharks and rays are threatened with extinctions. 3 species we have lost 3 species. And the one particular reason that has been singled out for this scenario is overfishing. And it has found out that in most of the tropical countries, overfishing is really high, and a huge number of species and individuals of sharks and rays are being caught and periled. Now, in Bangladesh, I'm sure some of you already know that we are a long coast, a very small country with a good coastline. And the most interesting bit is that we have very interesting habitat types throughout the coastline. So this is some photos about the southwestern region of Bangladesh, where we have the mighty Sundarbans. And just because we have such a big mangrove forest, and then the river tributaries, which then falls into the Bay of Bengal, we have very rich habitat types for many species of sharks and rays in the southwestern region. This is a photo which then shows you how the south central coast would look like. Now, it is very similar to the southwestern coast, but then again, of course, very dissimilar as well, because we do not have the Sundarbans here, and a lot of the fresh water is coming down from the Ganges basin down to this area. We have a lot of dynamic jars, which are sandy islands in these areas, and a huge number of local communities and fishers depending on these habitats for fishing. Most of our artisanal fisheries fish in the shallow waters. And this, on the other hand, in the southwestern eastern region of Bangladesh, where we do have the St. Martin's Island, the Teknaf Peninsula, when the water quality is quite different from the south central and southwestern region, and you could see it in here. And then we do have some coral patches, sea grasses, rocky habitats, which again, very important for some of the other species of sharks and rays. The important bit here for my presentation about these different types of habitats is that because we have such interesting habitats and such huge population pressure on the coastline, millions of people directly and indirectly depend on these fisheries. And you would be seeing within this area, we have about two different types of fisheries types, industrial and artisanal, and some subsistence for sure. And the artisanal fishing vessels, the number is extremely high. About 70,000 boats go out for fishing, which size from small to medium sized, as you can see from here. And we, of course, have subsistence, which is very smaller boats, which go out on a daily basis and catch some fish. We do have some targeted fishery for sharks and rays as well, and mostly rays, which are long lines, unbaited long lines, which are a few kilometers long. And then in each kilometer, you would be seeing 10 to 30,000 hooks, which reach down to the bottom level of the sea and would catch anything that has a flat body. And that's why it's really selective to flat-bodied rays with critical endangered species like the guitar fishes. Now, our study sites is throughout the coastline, especially in the southwestern and southwestern region, as you can see in here. And this is a photo to show you that how a landing site would look like where we work. So the question that we're extremely interested in at the beginning of my PhD was, what species do we have in Bangladesh of sharks and rays? What type of fisheries are there that they're being caught? Where are they being caught in terms of spatial management? And of course, what impact trade and such catch has on these species which are globally threatened. Now, as you can see, it's extremely difficult to work in such a scenario where thousands of specimens are being landed. It's extremely busy, and I'm sure some of you have the experience of working in the fisheries communities and landing sites. These are very busy times. People do not have time. They wouldn't really give you more than 30 seconds to sample one individual sharks and rays. And then again, for you, it is extremely difficult and sometimes impossible to actually sample all these formal and informal landing sites and then sample all species there is, because depending on our resources and time, sampling efforts can vary, and sometimes it's not really long. So we really have to think about that, what can we do in terms of collecting data on these species. Now I'm going to show some of the photos that at the initial time we were taking in terms of data collection, and you would understand that how difficult it was to collect such data, especially if you want to understand individual samples of this particular species. So it's very busy and a lot of species land, and it's very difficult to collect the data. Now, what we did here at this point of time is that it wasn't working for us. For only 2 to 3 people going out in the landing sites trying to collect as many data as possible, we were really biased in terms of collecting data only on the larger species easy to identify, and species which were very easy to collect the data on. And we were actually not being able to collect data on huge piles of sharks like this, or in specimens which were caught and we couldn't really identify at the landing sites. And we really wanted to find out a way that could really help us to deal with this problem. Then we came up with this idea that, well, why don't we use citizen science? And we had to really understand that what would work in these landing sites, right? Because there are different dynamics between fishers, traders, and who works there, who can work as a citizen scientist, are they really interested in it? Is it something that we are imparting on them because we are interested in the data, or are the citizens really interested to collect the data or not? So there were a lot of different questions at play. So at the beginning, what we did was we trained people who are already working on the landing sites. So for example, a person who's cutting the shark and ray for a living. So we really wanted to understand that if this person really wants to be involved, because this person, by virtue of his job, has to be in this landing sites anyway, and it's a low-paying job. So if we really train this person, would he be then interested to collect the data on a daily basis in a very simple way for us? And we started doing that. And then we identified students who have the time for a part-time job or interested in the species and has some background in terms of what sort of data we are looking for, and they wanted to collect this. And then we wanted to make it very simple. So we really didn't want to have huge piles of data sheets, then entering them and making it difficult for analysis as well. And we wanted to think about an app. But then again, we also were thinking about, we are working with people in many cases where literacy rates are really low. So we had to work in that understanding. So at the beginning, we started with a very paper-based, camera-based or phone camera-based data collection process. And it started back in 2016. The first year, it didn't really go very well. We were not getting a lot of standardized data. It was still piles of data. The sampling details were not really correct. We were also collecting DNA samples to see if the identifications that were done by the local data collectors were correct or not. And we ended up with huge amount of photos as well, which was very difficult to identify. But because we were given trainings every other month to the same people, investing on them, and we did give the time, sometimes in about a year, we started to get very interesting standardized data of sharks and rays with scales, with both ventral and dorsal photos, with photos which can be then used to morphologically identify the species. And if we have confusion, we have the DNA as a plan B. It was extremely interesting to see that this data started to come in, and even if one person didn't have the time, they were making sure that another person goes into the same sites and start collecting the data, because it was extremely collaborative in terms of how we are going to collect this data, and we have had given enough time to collect all those. And we started getting data from sites we didn't even have any idea that sharks and rays might land. These are informal sites. People were interested to work with us, and we started getting very interesting data sets. At this point of time, standing in early 2023, we have a humongous data set of thousands of specimens of sharks and rays, over 90 species that we have seen that are being caught within the coastline of Bangladesh. We haven't processed all the data as of now. We are preliminarily analyzing the data and started to publish very recently. One very interesting outcome of this particular research was that we started to identify and report species that were never been recorded before within Bangladesh. We had no idea that they are there. And we also started to noticing species which we thought either has gone from Bangladesh, we can't really find them anymore, or extremely rare species. The photos that you can see here, most of them have been identified for the first time in Bangladesh. And one short photo with a tape that you can see at the last row with the black background is a Ganges shark, which is extremely rare, and the number of the population size is extremely small as well. And after about 10 years, I think these records were the first records which rediscovered Ganges sharks within the waters of Bangladesh. So it was a very simple method. It wasn't highly technical. It wasn't very difficult, but it was time and the collaborative nature of this project that citizen science was really helping us to collect this many data, not only on the species diversity, but in terms of understanding what sort of fisheries are at play in Bangladesh, what sort of nets that are being deployed and that are being caught, that are catching more sharks than the others. And also that gave us this opportunity to delve into these communities and understanding their mindsets and their relationships with the certain species as well, which we think is extremely important when we think about management. So this is a little graph to tell you about what sort of data preliminary we have found out. As I have already mentioned, that we haven't processed all the data and analyzed all of it for a fuller review. But initially what we have found out that there is more than 90 species that has been reported, more than 15 species that has been reported for the first time in Bangladesh. And there are rare species still landing in Bangladesh, which were very difficult to report before in the previous studies. The most common species is a very small spade-nose sharks, which lands in thousands. The second largest species that, in terms of numbers, that lands in Bangladesh is the scalloped hammerhead shark, which is a critical endangered species. It's a CITES listed species as well. And we do see a huge number of pups and smaller size hammerhead sharks landing within Bangladesh, giving you an idea that there might be a nursery ground or a breeding ground somewhere very near within the coastline of Bangladesh. Apart from this, we have encountered several sawfishes, which are extremely rare, critically endangered. Over 90% of the populations have been wiped out around, depending on what species we're talking about. And we have also encountered huge numbers of guitar fishes, which I'm going to talk about a little later. Critically endangered again, depending on what species we're talking about. 99% of different populations have been wiped out around the world, but Bangladesh still have a good number of these species within very shallow water coastlines, which it is using not only for general habitats, but also for popping grounds, nursery grounds, and very critical, and thus very critical for these species as well. The next project, so that was that, and it's still ongoing, and we are thinking to upgrade it using an app, which I'm going to probably talk about in a different talk. But next, I really want to talk about the next project that we thought where citizen science was extremely important and gave us some excellent data and understanding on a species called the large-toothed sawfish. As you can see in this photo, this species can get huge. It's evolutionarily extremely important because we do not have anything like it within the shark and ray realm. You can see by the rostrum it has, but because it has a rostrum like this and it gets so big, it is extremely vulnerable as well, because it's very easy to catch no matter what gear you're using. If the gear is there within the waters where this particular fish is present, it's going to catch it. So the number of bycatch was always really high for particularly this species. And because it's such a large species, it gets its biological maturity really late and really doesn't give a lot of pups out. So you could understand why this particular species is so vulnerable in the global sense, not only in Bangladesh. Now, back in 2015, there was a paper published on sawfishes where the authors used local ecological knowledge to find out what happened with the sawfishes. And they found out that this has become so rare that the fishers said that they didn't even see one species in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. There are fishers who haven't seen one in their whole career. So that gives you an idea that this species has gone really, really down in terms of numbers. But just 3 decades ago, in late 1990s, there are accounts of fishery scientists saying that this particular species used to be found on the beach of Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh, and nobody was caring about it. Now, the big question was what happened in these 30 years that we don't even see this species anymore, and why not? And why aren't there any formal landing reporting in the landing sites? And then we delved into this idea that why don't we use this very simple cell phone generated network among traders and fishers who are interested can then give us a very simple information of if there was a sawfish seen, sighted, caught, landed, bought, sold, whatever, with a very simple photo, with very simple information such as how long was it a male or a female, who bought it, who caught it, what was used to being caught, where was it caught, and stuff like that. At the beginning of this particular project, I would say we were not very hopeful because we were thinking, well, there's so many fishers and we have connected only with a few of them through our project. What if this is not the area where this particular species lands and we don't get it? But to our utter surprise, we started to get very interesting reports of sawfish landing within Bangladesh through this network. Now, how does this network work? We know these traders, the traders know us. We have a gentleman's agreement of anonymity, so we can't really disclose who these people are. They have phones, they have very simple apps like WhatsApp, Viber, whatever app is available at their turn. And then there are fishers. Some of them also use smartphones, not all of them for sure. And the information that we're expecting can be very qualitative. It doesn't have to be entered in an Excel sheet. It doesn't have to be very fancy. It can be a voice note. For example, I've seen this particular species. I've caught it from this particular place. This was that long. It was sold with that much of money and stuff like that. And we started to see reports like this. As you can see, the most hugest species I've ever seen of sawfish that was caught somewhere in Chittagong, to even little body parts. For example, I haven't seen the whole fish, but I have seen the tail, I've seen the fin, I've seen local medicinal practitioners selling some parts of this species. And that gave us about 45 landing of large-toothed sawfish within Bangladesh in about 2.5 years. That was extremely interesting and important because before that, we didn't even know that many species were being landed, and there was a market and what sort of market there is. And all of those could have been understood from this project. And from there on, we started a more focused project looking into where the species live, where the suitable habitats, what sort of trade is happening, and everything that needs to be known for the better management of such a species. The third project that I'm going to talk about is, then the question comes, well, we know these species are being landed. We know these are critically endangered species. We know what sort of fisheries are catching these particular species. We know the market, but the one thing that we really don't know is where are they being really caught from? And this question, for being able to answer this question, you need a lot of resources. So you need to actually go out into the sea, track these species, or probably see where they're being caught from. There are so many very nice and interesting scientific methods to identify habitats in terms of fishing grounds for such species. But of course, at the beginning, we did not have all those money to do it. And we wanted to see where can we really collaborate with these fishers, where we believe that each point of this vessel going out is a data point, right? For us, we could have only collected data probably from a certain space. We could have collected data for a certain amount of time. But what we are missing here is that all these 70,000 boats that we're talking about within the artisanal fisheries could actually work as one single data point that could give you so much understanding, and not only in terms of what sort of fish are being caught, but actually where they're being caught from. What time are they being caught from? What season? What sort of gears are more prone to catch these species than the others? So many different questions which are extremely important when we are thinking about managing such species within such fisheries. So there comes that, well, let's use open access apps, which on offline can track a boat. Can we really use it to identify where these boats are going, and then identify where these areas are, where most of the fishing grounds are. Now the question really came is that, okay, we could give a phone, we could install this app, and the fishers could take it and we can actually identify where they're going. But the next question comes is, but how would we know that what species are they're catching in these particular areas? And then comes the idea that, well, let's collaborate with the fishers, that how can we also know that what species are being caught in those particular regions that we are being tracking with this boat. So we use this very simple app, which is open access. You can find it, and it tracks wherever you go, and then you can download the CSV file and can very easily track, see the boat, where the boat was going. The next question comes is, then would the fishers would have enough time to collect data on what species that are being caught? Now, how can we do this? Then we thought, why don't these fishers also use the same phone to take photos of what species that are being caught? And we have given them very simple equipments like a scale, like a phone, like gloves, and all those that would be needed for such data to be collected. Now, observer data is extremely important because that's first-hand data. So this is just one track of a certain fishing boat that has gone down with this app and collected all this data of the species, and also the track line of where these species are being caught from. As of today, we have tracked about 6 boats for about 51 trips, and have seen what sort of species that are being catching, what is the environment look like, where are they going to collect these species, and we're creating heat maps to see where is the ground where most of the species are being caught in greater numbers. Now, it was very interesting because we thought that we will be only getting data from the tracks and the species, but we're actually getting a lot more than that. So we are actually now know how these fisheries operate actually within these areas. How does it look like? How their lives are on the boat, and what sort of music they listen to. So that was very fascinating, and we're writing the paper as of now. I think that was pretty phenomenal in terms of how much you can get with so much of less investment, and so much of interesting things that happen in the sea that we not always have a lot of access to. So that was particularly very interesting. I just wanted to show you this particular map. This is just one boat, a few trips to show that where these fisheries are going out to. And the heat map shows you where they are spending most of their times. Now, the straight lines are the lines where they pass through, they go, but the heat maps, the yellow and green blobs that you can see are these areas where they stop, which means that they're either spending the night or catching fish. Then it gives you more precise understanding of where those particular species photos that they have taken were taken from. The fourth project, which I think the last one that I'm going to talk about, is that, well, we talk about citizen science a lot. We use different types of technology to understand a lot of it. But one thing in this whole science is missing is the true sense, a model which actually then puts these people into a decision-making table. So I am creating this research question. I'm interested in this particular habitat. Bangladesh is interested in managing this particular species, but the real question comes in then, the people we're collaborating with, what are they interested in? That's where our interest really were, to create a technology or something that doesn't only help us, but help them as well. So we kind of, in collaboration with them, we kind of mapped all 7 types of fisheries that are operating with Bangladesh in terms of where they mostly fish. I'm not going to spend a lot of time in this slide or in this story because I really want to go into the last bit of it. Is there that in doing this, we kind of collaborated with more than 1,100 fishers to identify these really important grounds where different types of fisheries are fishing. And then we also use this knowledge to identify where a species like a large-toothed sawfish, as you can see here, are being caught. Now, we also use this knowledge to not only identify where they caught spatially, but also in a temporal sense, where was the last time that was being caught? Is the habitat shrinking or not? And questions like that. In doing so, we had this amazing opportunity to really collaborate with these communities, not only from the perspective that we have a research question, we want to answer that, but from the perspective of what they really need. Now, in doing so, in a few different projects, we kind of also understand these communities are extremely marginalized. In many cases, they're pro-poor and vulnerable to not only natural problems, but a lot of socio-ecological problems as well. Healthcare, education, cost bearers of many management activities, and not enough livelihood generation programs, which really is important for their livelihoods. Now, we really wanted to know, well, we now know where the species are being caught from. We now know where the species can be. Now, if we really want to save the species, the fishers has to release this species alive. How can we incentivize this particular thing? Because just to give you an example, a species like the sawfish can be sold in thousands of dollars because coastal people believe that it cures cancer. Now, 1 kg of sawfish meat can be sold into 4,000 Dhaka, which is about $40 or more in some cases. So you can imagine it's very difficult for a fisher to actually get a species like this and then release it out of goodwill when the person is actually earning $150 to $200 a month. So that's a question not of goodwill and pro-social behavior, that's a question of ability, that how can you make these people able and facilitate them in doing something which is important for the species, and a best practice can be called as a best practice at sea. From there came this idea that what sort of incentive can be designed and which can be low cost, but then again helps these fishers to take such decisions like a live release. So from there came this idea that we are still currently working on, which is a low cost technology, which not only video records and audio records the fishing activities within the boat and tracks the boat to see where they're going, but also gives them the opportunity to communicate with each other, like with another boat having the same device. And that not only help them to mitigate a vulnerability like there is no communication when one boat goes out to the sea. So in Bangladesh, we really haven't given like radios or any sort of communication devices to these fishers. And when they go out to sea for fishing, they do not have any communication to the harbor or to any other fishing vessel. So if there is a problem, like a pirate is there, if there is a problem, there is a weather forecast that they didn't know. If there is a problem like their engine broke or anything, they wouldn't be able to really communicate with anybody to ask for help or to reach out to anybody for something else. Now, in our interviews and a lot of surveys within these coastal communities, we found out that was a common problem every fishers were talking about, that we do a very high-risk job without a lot of safety net. And then we asked, would a communication device help or not? And that was really, it was amazing to see that these communities were extremely interested on a device like that. So we created this prototype device where there's a communication phone and an app by which if another fisher has the same device, they can communicate with each other through text. And then all these things in terms of what's happening are being video tracked. Now, we thought it's as simple as that, right? So we will be getting a lot of data in terms of where they fish, what sort of fish they fish, and if they're what they're doing. And in return of using such a device for our, research, they're getting an incentive like a communication device. But the fishers then came up with amazing solutions, amazing thoughts around this. And they said it's not only about getting the communication, it gives you another layer of safety. So videotaping what's happening in the sea gives them an opportunity to let the boat owners know what actually happened in the boat in terms of trust. So for example, there sometimes are cases where the boat owners might say, hey, you couldn't catch any fish, another boat did, you might have just sold it somewhere else, and they would lose their job. Or there's a pirate who probably had taken their net or the catch or anything else, or there was another sort of problem, the boat owner might not believe them. So they said that gives them another layer of safety. Apart from that, that also have boosted up kind of a social interest of having something like this would improve their actions at sea. Now we have just started using this. We're troubleshooting it, and it's done just 2 months that they are using it, but even then we are getting amazing data in terms of videos, activities, and also would this particular device really encourage them to release any critical endangered species alive. So the idea was very simple, that what sort of incentives can be given through low-cost technology to these fishers so they are more able, they are facilitated to do some good practices at sea, like releasing protected and critically endangered species. And as of now, 6 fishing vessels and about 50 fishers have agreed to use it and practice live release whenever there is a critical endangered species boycott within these nets. I'm not talking a lot about this particular device because it's still, we are piloting it, and we will be analyzing and seeing the video recordings in the month of June to see how much has been done. So with that, I just wanted to finish my talk with this thought, is that technology has gone everywhere at this point of time, and we are getting so much out of it in terms of AI, in terms of machine learning, in terms of low-cost technologies and whatnot. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to the point that how we are using this technology. Are we making these people only the consumer of it, or we are really collaboratively creating this technology to help and to design mutually beneficial management tools whereby this particular communities are not only marginalized or end users of a certain technology or the citizen science methodologies, whereby there is no scope for them to be really facilitated, and the state couldn't have been improved. Thank you. I'd love to take questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alifa, for your nice and informative talk. So now we have time to take few questions. So if you have any question, you can just raise your hand, or you can just write in the text in the message box. So I can see Nimit raised his hand. So Nimit, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to have a few comments as well as ask a question. So one comment is that I'm trying to convince my daughter to stay with me to learn marine science at this age. She is at elementary stage, but she likes a lot, and she enjoyed the guitar fish photographs. So that is one comment. And I just wanted to ask a question. There is no like a subject related doubt. I understand how important this is. The query is in different side. Past year, I actually mentored some of the students who were working on the similar solutions in India. And the query is that whether you would be interested to guide them developing similar solutions so that, we can scale these kind of activities up. So is it something okay that, I can just put you into, or put the students in touch with you rather?
Thank you, Nimit, very much, and all the very best to have your daughter in the same realm of sciences. And thank you very much for your kind comments. I'd be very happy to be connected with your students, and be more than happy if we could help and come up with similar solutions which are scalable. So please do connect them with me, and be more than happy to talk.
Thank you. I will just through Subrata or Lika, I will just approach you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. So, any other questions?
While people are thinking, I can ask something. So Alifa, first of all, congratulations and thank you so much for this amazing talk. It's really impressive. And I was just wondering, I never worked with fisheries, but I always hear how difficult it is to approach fishermen. They're reluctant initially. So how was it for you? For how long were you working with them? How was the first approach, and how did you convince them to collaborate?
Thank you very much, Lillian. It's an extremely important question. So how do I start? So just to give you an example. So for example, when would you collaborate with me? It's as simple as that. A question, when a fisher would collaborate with you. So I have to trust you. I need to feel respected. I need to understand that the topic that had been, talked between us, it's mutually beneficial and I understand it. And the most important thing is that this is not a person who is giving me a task, but asking what can be done to mitigate a problem that I am facing. It was similar with the fishers. I started working with these fishing communities back in early 2016, when I was just a graduate student. What I used to do is go out every month for a week in a certain fishing community in Cox's Bazar. And we didn't have any research question or any project. The idea was as simple as what's happening. There is not and Subrata Bhai would also know that we do not have a lot of literature around marine megafauna around Bangladesh and what's happening and what are the socio-ecological issues and like in-depth understanding of, the relationship with the ocean. And so the big question was, what is happening? And we used to go out and understand and just sit, there are occasions where you used to sit on a tea stall with them, having tea, sitting, no question asked, so that these people could know that you're a person like them and you have an interest in a certain thing, and you're not someone very invasive. And I'm saying using this word invasive because in many ways, when we have a research project, we have a very limited amount of time to deliver a certain project result. So we have a fieldwork plan for a week or 2 weeks or maybe a month for the whole year. And we think we can go out, talk to the people, get the data, write the paper, and published or complete the research project. And it never works like this. You have to spend that amount of time so that these people need to be familiarized with you and your intentions, and they need to trust you. And if that trust is built, it's so easy. I haven't found many reluctant fishers. I have found fishers who are interested to talk regarding these issues. And the solutions, for example, the last device we were talking about, it was not something that we devised and then tried to deploy with the fishers. It was more like, what do you need? Fishers were talking about, oh, but text doesn't work. We want phones. Can you give us phones so that we can talk from the deep sea to the harbor of the boat owners, which is impossible at this point of time, right? So it was like this. They designed what they need, and we kind of packaged it in a box in terms of what we need as well. So I think at the beginning, the most important, to summarize your question, the most important bit is spending time, even before designing your research question, building that trust with this community, and really honestly, openly discuss what you are trying to achieve with your research project. Once you achieve that, any questionnaire is an easy questionnaire, and any sort of collaboration is pretty easy. Yeah, if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. And I have a follow-up question, actually kind of related. Did you feel any distinction because for being a female scientist, a woman?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate in some cases. In terms of how much extra work I had to do to be able to go into the field was immense in terms of what a male has to do to travel at night, to go to these places, live alone in a hotel, sketchy hotel and stuff like that. So you need to do like probably 50 tasks extra to be able to be in these communities if you're going alone than your counterparts. But on the other hand, when I was in the fishing communities, I didn't really feel like an outsider. I was really easily taken, maybe because there's a belief system that, well, a woman probably is more naive and probably wouldn't have I don't know, the capacity to do bad stuff. So there are good sides, bad sides, both. But of course it is different. It's even, so for example, now I have the opportunity to take students with me from Dhaka University or any other universities that I'm collaborating with in field trips, right? And I would always make sure that in my field trips, if there is 2 male students, there has to be 2 female students, so that, you know, we create this, we break these barriers that, well, a female student can't really spend 7 days or 7 nights in a remote island, and to break. But then again, I have found out that it is difficult for them to be able to go and do the same work as opposed to their male counterparts. And with all due respect to the male counterparts, it has nothing to, you know, nothing about them. It's more about the system, the systemic problems that are very embedded into the society, where they have to do a little extra bit in terms of health issues, in terms of sanitation, in terms of would they be able to be on the boat without a bathroom the whole day collecting data as opposed to a male. Now, the question really is not that if a female would be able to be in the boat the whole day. The question is, do your project ensures that that person can? It's not about just being a woman or a man. Because we haven't asked those questions, that, hey, your project has inclusivity in embedded into the system so that everyone who's included feels comfortable and have everything needed to do the job. We have asked women, oh, why can't you go? Why, I am not going to take you because you take more time, or it's an extra hassle. So it is different, but things are changing slowly but surely.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's completely true, and things that we take for granted and that we never considered. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, thank you.
For the
And so we have 2 more questions in the chat box. Very quick question. One from Samiul Huda. Thank you very much, ma'am, for your valuable presentation. I had a query about the device. How could you make sure that they are actually releasing the endangered species after getting the device? And if there is a monitoring process, what if they are not releasing critically endangered species alive? Thanks.
And that's a very good question, Samuel. Thank you for asking. And that's where the video and audio tape works. So there is, within the device, there is a video which records the whole activity for 7 days within the boat, so you would know what the fishers are doing. But then again, I just wanted to make sure that we didn't want to police them. We didn't want to, you know, direct them. You have to do something. It's we're giving you a device, and in return you have to do something. That wasn't our tone. The idea was, can we collaboratively do something like this? If I am helping you something, would you help me with something? And are you really doing it to monitor that we have that video camera where everything is being recorded? I'm sorry I couldn't show you those videos because these are huge videos. We haven't cut them in short pieces to add into the presentations, but we can actually monitor them in doing it. But the most important bit is not being able to monitor, because at the end of the day, you won't be able to monitor 70,000 boats, would you? That's not going to happen. We have to trust into the system whereby this mutually beneficial incentives works, so that people feel that, well, I can do it. Releasing a species is more beneficial than not releasing it. That's where we have to economically create, so that we do not have to police. Thank you for your question.
Yeah, thank you. And we have one more question from Yurida Liana. Thank you very much, ma'am, for the amazing presentation. I do have curiosity regarding 2 aspects. Firstly, how did you convince the citizens, especially those from the fishing communities, interested to contribute data? I think you answered already this question. And then second thing is it by provided them some form of monetary incentive? Even so, most fishermen are not very transparent about their catch, fearing the legal aspects. How did you get them convinced? And secondly, one of the main problems most citizen science projects face is to maintain consistency and quality of data collected by citizens. I am curious to know how this project addresses this issue.
Yeah.
So sorry, Alifa, before you answer, I just was informed we have a second meeting starting in 2 minutes time. So can you, I'm so sorry about this. Can you make a short answer, and then we can send a more complete answer to Euridas by email later?
Yeah, sure. very quickly, Urida, the first thing about citizen science and acceptance about fisheries is about what sort of incentives they're getting, and if they, have a collaborative nature of relationship with you to collect those data. If you're collaborating with 100 people, 20 are not going to give you standardized data, and you have to have that acceptance that, well, I am going to get 20% very biased problematic data, and the rest is going to be good, and it can be, incorporated into your project design. And the second question was about, sorry, I forgot what the second question was about.
The data quality.
The data quality. So for us to standardize the data quality took 2 years. So we started this project in 2017. The real qualityful data started to come in 2019. So it's about time, and be consistent with one thing. Do not change what you are asking for. So if you're not changing what you're asking for and you do it for a long period of time, standardized data starts to come in. And then, of course, you have to have room for some not good quality data, and that's okay. And I can talk
Thank you.
with you.
I'm sorry.
So thank you, Alifa, for your nice presentation. So thank you all for joining with us. And that's all for today. Hopefully we'll meet again for another webinar and sometimes later. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was really nice. Thank you.